Today, a federal jury convicted El Chapo on all counts he faced. And while few think the infamous drug lord has anything in common with Roger Stone, recently arrested by the feds in that video that he leaked, the former Trump advisor's own allies, like Sean Hannity, have been arguing that the FBI's pretty traditional arrest there actually looked like a greeting fit for, yes, El Chapo.
The footage depicts what you'd expect if the FBI raided the home of a Mexican drug lord, maybe even SEAL Team 6 going into bin Laden's compound. For context, Roger Stone is a senior citizen accused of false statements to Congress.
Why did the FBI send, 27 agents armed with rifles, body armor, to arrest Stone for lying to Congress? He's not El Chapo.
This show was put on to embarrass and intimidate Stone.
Fact check. He is not El Chapo. But there was also no evidence that this raid was particularly unusual. And before we turn to a police expert on that point, consider how Stone himself was just confronted with that view by a person who just phoned right into the InfoWars conspiracy site show and tried to put Roger in his place.
You're a marshmallow. You guys are snowflakes. Those cops were professional. The FBI, they were gentlemen. They came to your house. They didn't throw you down on the ground. You say your dogs were terrified, and your wife was out in the street without her shoes on in the Florida freezing cold 59 degrees. You guys are snowflakes, and you're going to go down in prison. You're facing 40-plus years, Stone. It's coming down on you.
I am joined by Sam Nunberg, a former Trump campaign aide who's worked closely with Roger Stone and ultimately provided testimony to the Mueller grand jury about Roger Stone, and former NYPD detective Mark Claxton. He is the director of the Black Law Enforcement Alliance. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Mark, let's start with the facts. I won't ask you to evaluate who's a snowflake, but this has turned public attention on the rather dramatic raid. You see the long guns. You see all the attention on it. Was that, in your view, a proportionate and normal raid?
If the level of force or the presence by the professional law enforcement on the scene there was completely appropriate. This is really a nothing burger. And this is what happens when you have people who are accustomed to a certain privilege and have a certain status who are not accustomed to the realities of the world. I mean, criminals are oftentimes apprehended by law enforcement. That's why we love the law enforcement community so much. So this really is a nothing burger, and it's an attempt, I suspect, by Mr. Stone and his affiliates really to gain some sympathy and some leverage on his ongoing criminal matter.
You think, bottom line, you think they're just out of touch with how these raids work because they don't have the life experience or they don't care to be informed?
They are absolutely out of touch with it, and they don't care to be informed. I just find it curious that after decades of complaints, largely by minority communities regarding the use of force, it's sometimes during the course of execution of an arrest warrant, that they've been largely ignoring those circumstances. But here you have Roger, who was handled with kid gloves, who was handled professionally, who was handled in a way that really is textbook, a nothing burger, and they have major complaints and concerns about it. Maybe now they'll be pushing for some police reform.
Well, I think you make a lot of important points, and we'll put them to Sam Nunberg. You did a lot of work for Roger Stone. Mr. Claxton says Mr. Stone is wrong, that he's out of touch, that he's misleading. And as for the data, we can put it up on the screen here. When you look at how these SWAT team targets have gone historically, although black Americans make up a small proportion of the nation, they are often dealt with by these SWAT teams at a higher percentage there. And you see, to Mr. Claxton's point, white Americans less so. The El Chapo comparison, especially Rich here on the day of the conviction, is Roger wrong?
Well, I spoke to my lawyer today about this because this isn't exactly my expertise. And he told me, Ari, that Patrick Brackley, in light of the charges that Roger was facing, which included obstruction of justice, witness tampering, that the government would want to get the evidence before Roger could possibly destroy it. And for that reason alone, that this made sense. Now, from
meaning that he's wrong to claim this was somehow overreach.
Yes, meaning he's wrong from a legal point of view and from what's practically and normally done.
And you've done a lot of work with him, political messaging and otherwise.
Right, so from a political messaging
what are we seeing here? Because, you know, you famously came on this show and you were at the time explaining your alliance with him. You ultimately complied with law enforcement. People ultimately give you credit for that. But on the political side, is this vintage Stone taking a situation that's rather serious and trying to turn into another circus, which, yes, we're covering, but we're also covering it because it's everywhere and we're willing to fact check it?
It goes into the overall narrative of supporters of the president or opponents of this investigation want to build, that these people are being unfairly targeted, unfairly treated for crimes that aren't connected per se to Russian collusion, and that Mueller and a couple of those specific people that they like to talk about, such as Weissman and Jeanine Rhee, are going after them, to make a point. And also a common thing you'll hear in conservative media too, which I even laughed at in one interview very quick, was they'll say, well, nobody will want to work for Donald Trump now when you see the way people are treated like this. And I think that it just goes to trying to delegitimize the investigation. Anything Mueller does, you want to hit for any reason, whether it's right or wrong.
How can I put this?
I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm explaining to you the strategy.
No, I understand. I'm just, sometimes I think while I'm on live TV, I think the claim that people might not want to work for Donald Trump because it lands them in legal trouble might have more to do with working with Donald Trump than the ultimate way the legal trouble goes down.
Argue that, yeah.
Some people end up convicted. Some people end up charged. Some people end up with high legal bills and not charged. David Pecker got immunity, even though he was involved in something that Michael Cohen confessed to as a crime, but now that may have blown up. In other words, a lot of people are in hot water regardless. Now, while you're here, I want to ask you on the other big news, Michael Cohen, take a listen to Senator Richard Burr, a fellow Republican, just blasting Cohen now, who, of course, is scheduled to report to prison. Take a look.
Any goodwill that might have existed in the committee with Michael Cohen is now gone. On Twitter, a reporter reported he was having a wild night Saturday night, eating out in New York with 5 buddies. Didn't seem to have any physical limitations. I would prefer to get him before he goes to prison. But the way he's positioning himself, not coming to the committee, we may help him go to prison.
Do you think Cohen has legitimate concerns here or needs to get down there and testify?
Look, I think he needs to get down there and testify because, as I said to you earlier when I was on this program on that extraordinary panel that night, Republicans, Trump supporters are chomping at the bit to delegitimize Michael because, as you know, and as you've covered, there are 2 Michael Cohens here. There's the Michael Cohen that the special counsel says cooperated after lying to them initially, and then there's the Michael Cohen of the Southern District who says, no, he hasn't fully cooperated, and we think that he should have a harsh sentence on him. Plus, obviously, Richard Burr would not like Michael to begin with because he was convicted of lying to their committee. Now, I've been in that committee, and Ari, it's very important because I hear a lot of reporting about from Ken Delaney in here today. That committee wants the Mueller report ultimately. One of the last questions I got in my interview with the Senate Intel Committee was, is there anything we didn't ask you that you think we should be looking into, or is there anything that the special counsel's office asked you that you think we should be looking into? And that, as opposed to the special counsel, which ends in your voluntary, is there anything we didn't ask you that
That's
you think we should be looking
interesting. You're
into?
saying, because you've faced both, which
Yes.
is part of the reason we talk to you. Most people don't have that experience. You're saying the senators were chasing Mueller and what he might have asked, and Mueller never cared what the senators were chasing.
Well, correct.
Correct. Final thought, Mark? On any of the above?
Oh, listen, this is a classic case of and even in regards to Michael Cohen, let me just tell you that it really is clear that privilege really has some tremendous advantages in regards to this case, from the way in which the prosecution is handling Michael Cohen and other defendants related to this case, and even the Roger Stone execution of a search warrant. We don't do raids, we do execution of search warrants. Privilege has its privileges.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.